kids should get into this sport more, because it helps to teach them about resilience. Because it's about you, right? It's about you playing against the course. Any other sport the kids play, they're playing in the team. So, and the whole point is you win and you lose as a team. So even if you make individual errors, you're not really having to deal with the resilience of it because you're supported by the rest of your team. But actually, in isolation, golf is so good for that. So.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Golf Yourself Healthy. This is, Ben, I think this is either Volume 3 or Volume 4 of Golf Buddies Aloud. I can't remember now. But I think what's good is, given that I saw you not too long ago, I don't have to rehash the same mugshots of you and me from when we played at Royal Norwich, when I put out a nice glossy little picture of this episode. So we've got our mugs from when we played at Prince's recently. Yes. So let's check in with you, Ben, first of all. How are you doing?
Yeah, very, very good, actually. I'm very much looking forward to a holiday we've got coming up at the end of August. I need a bit of a break from work, I think. Starting to feel a little bit burnt out. And I haven't actually been playing as much golf as I would like to have done, but that's mainly down to the fact that most of the time I'm being spent at the golf club at the moment is with Jensen. So getting to play 6 holes here and there and things like that, but not any more than that. Yeah.
Well, I think we should maybe start by saying a little bit on that, because for the listeners' benefit, when I was on a WhatsApp exchange with Ben the other day and getting ready for doing this recording, he was sending me that from, you said, what was it you said? I'm working from the golf club at the moment.
Yeah, with inverted commas. Although I did work. And whilst I did have my golf clubs in the car, I only got my putter out when I finished working to have a 15-minute putt before Jensen finished his. So he was there for a golf day, like a junior golf day. So we started at 9. They did a load of warm-up stuff and chipping and putting and driving range in the morning. Then had a bit of lunch and they went out on the academy course for a bit of Texas Scramble between the 8 of them. So, and he won an award in the putting challenge. He was the only one to get a hole in one. So he was delighted with that. But it was a good day for him. He really enjoyed it. And it's good to see him sort of mucking in with some other kids that he doesn't really know. And there was quite a mix of talent. There was some pretty good kids there, and there were some kids that were starting out the same as him. So, but he seemed to have a really good time. And then subsequently, I was a bit concerned that he might say that he didn't want to go back for the lesson on Saturday because he'd been playing golf all day Friday. To which he said, "No, I'm going back. I've got to get my practice in." So he went back and had another lesson on the Saturday. So Brian and I sat there with a beer and a glass of wine and got some chips and watched him chip for an hour. It was quite nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Really good. Really good. Well, glad to hear you're still enjoying it. So Ben and I doing this Golf Buddies Aloud episode, as we've explained before, it makes a nice casual, if you will, break from the kind of solo episodes that I do, as well as guest episodes. And so we recently closed out season 1 of the podcast, and we'll be starting up again with the second season of the podcast in the next few weeks. So it felt like a good opportunity, to me at least, to have this sort of sandwiched in the middle of closing out the first season, looking ahead to the second season. And I will spend a bit of time with you, Ben, and with the listeners, sharing a bit about what we can expect and what kind of themes and things are being covered in that season. Because, as I've said already, I've been batch recording, really. I've been sort of lining people up over the last few weeks and months and had some really great conversations, and a lot of different things are coming up. And as you would reasonably expect, this theme that we like to talk about at GYH of golf being good for you, that is coming to life in various different ways with the various different people.
Yeah, I'll be interested to ask you what your thoughts were on how that went compared to how you recorded the first season, where you were having a bit more of a break between the interviews, like that intensive. Because I've seen obviously a couple of things on Instagram you've posted of upcoming episodes, like how that actually felt. So we can get into that a bit later, but I'd be interested to know what you preferred and what you took from it, what you didn't like about it, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a good shout. So we've got that to cover. I have played a bit of golf since you and I last saw each other and spoke, Ben, and I've got some juicy topics I think that we need to get into tonight that we can really get our teeth into, and we'll be not maybe contentious, but at the same time we'll sort of strike up a decent debate between you and me, I think, and then also give a call to action to our listeners based on what we'll talk about to get in touch using, go over to golfyourselfhealthy.com, use the contact tab, get in touch. Love to hear your contributions, your thoughts of the things that we're going to cover. I will also say at this point, I do want to, again, just offer a reflection and a word of thanks to all of our listeners that have, in the 5 or 6 months that we've been operating, I do reflect with pride on how we've got, I think, so really Spotify and Apple, quite honestly, are our biggest they are fundamentally the biggest podcasting platforms, Ben, but they account for something like 90% of the people that listen to this podcast. And across those two platforms, we've got nothing but 5-star reviews, and we've got 49 of them so far. And I have to pinch myself with that a little bit, just because I think it's a reflection, hopefully, of how much value people are getting out of this. And I've really enjoyed how, as I've said before, I catch up with, either in person or on the telephone or remotely or whatever, with friends who are either golfers or non-golfers, and they share with me what they're getting out of the podcast. And so it's been I thank people for that, and it's been very complimentary and reassuring. Keep the reviews coming, and also please do follow us on those podcasting platforms, because again, if you do value it and you're getting value, then I hope that you'll want to see the show go from strength to strength and grow. So actually just clicking that follow button in those podcast apps will just help us with that. Basically, the follows mean more listens, more downloads, more engagement. So please help us. And it's totally free to do that. It doesn't cost you a thing. So I guess, Ben, I'm just going to kick us off with the Olympics.
Okay.
The Olympics are on at the moment, and just another update actually for you and for the GYH listeners. So we've recently just taken on, Brogan has joined the GYH team. He is coming on board as our podcast producer for the GYH podcast. He can't be with us here tonight because he's a recent graduate. He just qualified in his broadcasting production degree, and from the University of West of Scotland. So he's an Irishman, loves his golf, lives on the outskirts of Glasgow. Lots to like about that. So keeping the Celtic connection strong in the podcast, Ben. So you're
outnumbered now.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the main reasons I bring him up is because we were speaking the other day, and he said, "So Kris, what's your view on the inclusion of golf in the Olympics?" So I gave him my honest answer to that. But what's your take on golf being an Olympic sport, Ben?
I think I don't see the harm in it, because I think from an exposure perspective, if you're talking about growing the game, I mean, let's face it, right? Most of the sports that are in the Olympics, the vast majority of them, we would never watch outside of an Olympic year. So I was watching the diving, 3-meter diving the other day. I wouldn't choose to watch that any other time other than in the Olympics. So it works both ways, right? There'll be people that would not normally watch golf at any other point other than when it's in the Olympics. So I think from an exposure perspective, I think it's good. I think where they probably missed a bit of a trick is in the way that they do the football at the Olympics. The vast majority of the squads have to be under 23s, I think. What I would have liked to have seen as a similar thing for the golfers having to be under the age of 23 or something like that, or not be in the top 50 in the world rankings, because it's about, yes, you want to see the best players in the world, but people who watch golf can see the best players in the world every week on Sky Sports, or they can watch Live Golf on YouTube, wherever they're showing that at the moment. So I would probably like a little bit of restriction around it, because all it really now feels like is just another normal golf competition. There's nothing that makes it any different to stuff that's in. I mean, obviously the formats are a little bit different because it's pairs, isn't it? It's a pairs competition. I don't know. What do they do? Do they do foursomes, or is there an individual thing as well?
I'm not sure of the... Is it not individual?
I'm going to Google it while we're talking.
So what I do know from having read earlier is that it's 4 days, and I think it's stroke play. So
yeah, because when Rosie won it, he won it just a singles thing, didn't he? There was no team element to it.
I think so, exactly, right? So, because there can't be if you think about it, because one person wins gold, well, it wouldn't be the case if they deliberately made it a pairs thing, but you're right. I think it was individuals winning gold, silver,
I've just
and
looked
bronze.
up 72 hole stroke play.
So, I mean, that's very traditional, right, in terms of...
So do something a bit different with it, right? There's an opportunity to have done so. They could have done a foursomes competition, and therefore it would have been cool to see Shane Lowry and Rory McIlroy win it together, although, I'm not a massive fan of Rory, but or something along that, to see the country winning it rather than the individual winning it, because that's really what the Olympics are about, isn't it? It's about you representing your country, I think.
I totally agree with the point on do something a bit different, and that's kind of what Brogan was saying to me the other day. He was kind of like, why, for example, could it not have been match play? Because at least from the player's point of view as well, then that's something a bit different, and it kind of. And I guess for me, I'm all for golf being an Olympic sport for several reasons. One is, like you say, the exposure element. I think Golf Yourself Healthy. This brand, this podcast is partly about growing the game of golf, I suppose, and actually getting more exposure to it and getting people more interested in it. And to your point, I think quite plausibly, I'm not saying I'm going to watch archery on the television tomorrow and decide I want to take up archery.
Yeah, there's a chance though, right? Someone will watch that sport and think, I want to have a go at that.
Correct, right? And I guess the way in which you present it is like, name me another Olympic sport where it goes on for hours and hours. Like, golf is a long game as it is. I guess they've missed it. It does feel like they've missed a trick. Like, they could have done because, for instance, just sort of spitballing here, for instance, right? I think for a time on what used to be the European Tour, and it's now the DP World Tour, they tried the Golf Sixes thing.
Yeah.
And it's like a micro bite-sized format. It had sort of almost like, dare I say, live-style vibes, it's like music in the background and things like that, I think. But it kind of, I'd need to watch it at the Olympics in Paris to actually see how it comes across, but I can't help but feel like it's going to be a very bland.
Yeah, and as I said, like, if you think about, let's think about a different sport which is similar in the fact that it's got a bit of a reputation for being a bit more of an old man sport. It's actually been rejuvenated, but if you think about, if they were to put cricket into the Olympics, they would not put the 5-day format into the Olympics, would they? They would put 2020 into the Olympics. So
exactly.
Why would you not think about doing that from a changing thing? And the other thing that I find quite amusing is there's all the, and I know we won't go into this too much, but there's all of the kind of the animosity between the PGA Tour and the Live Golf, and the PGA Tour saying, well, there's no cuts in Live Golf, so it's anti-competitive, no cuts in the Olympics. But a vast majority of the players that are playing are on the PGA Tour. In fact, I think the Live Tour golfers cannot play in the Olympics. Is that right? Am I making that up?
I think no, they can.
They can.
And I'll tell you why I know that, because I watched about 20 minutes of Live on the weekend.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I'll touch on that briefly in a moment. Like we've always said, we won't go deep on this.
Yeah.
Don't get a good, but I think there's an important thing I wanted to bring up about Live. But I do know, when I was watching David Puig, one of the Spanish players that plays in Sergio Garcia's team,
he's playing.
The commentators were saying, "Oh, this is his last Live appearance before he goes to Paris to
fine.
compete for Spain." So yeah.
But anyway, I just thought it was interesting. As I say, I think they've missed a bit of a trick, but it would still be good to see it there, right? And that Le Golf National setup that the Ryder Cup was at a few years ago was spectacular. So it'll be entertaining to watch, I'm sure.
I think a wider point for me about this one that kind of piques my curiosity and interest a little bit, again in the spirit of trying to grow interest in the game of golf and for people to see it in a more progressive and modern light, for instance, is and build engagement, is how, I don't know if you know of Joost Luiten, the Dutch golfer. Did you see all the headlines about how he's been basically precluded from participating in the Olympics by his own country?
Yeah, I saw something in the papers about that. What was the story behind that?
So basically, for those listening who don't know, the keen golfers will probably, but those who don't follow professional golf may not know, Joost Luiten is basically the number one Dutch professional golfer, plays in the DP World Tour, has won many times on the DP World Tour, did very well last season, and qualified in his own right. He was absolutely, off the bat, the first name on the sheet. to go and represent the Netherlands at the Olympics in Paris. And basically the Dutch Olympic Committee, as far as I understand, basically decided, it's almost like they prioritised the sports in which they wanted their athletes to represent them in. And they said, we do not believe that we have any chance of winning a medal or a gold medal or whatever.
That's a kick in the teeth, isn't it? Christ. The guy's a professional golfer. Do you know what I mean? He competes week in, week out on this thing, makes a living from it. So he's obviously got some ability. Christ almighty.
But so it's interesting because my sister lives in the Netherlands, right? And has done for several years now, and is a listener to this podcast. Hello, Joanna. I asked her, I was like, look, what's going on here? And basically she was making the point that how, like in at least in the Netherlands anyway, golf is just, doesn't even appear on the radar. No one's that, but it's not a mainstream sport by any stretch of the imagination, you know? And so... Yeah,
but I'm not being funny. There's an awful lot of sports in there that they probably got representation in that are also not mainstream sports, right?
No, probably, yeah. It'd be interesting to look at that.
They sent some people out to do the dressage or something like that. It's like, come on, guys.
No, I know.
I just so this is not
I know. But at a very human level, I kind of sympathise a lot for the Dutch competitors, just because, like, I think I'd like to think that, I mean, I don't know about you, Ben, but, I can't think of any greater honour than to represent your country at an Olympic Games, the experience of getting to go and do it and everything. And I think as a golfer, as a professional golfer as well, that, like, Joost Luiten realistically is never going to qualify for the European Ryder Cup team. I don't think he's that good or good enough to make it. And so, like, that,
but even if he does, he's then representing Europe and Great Britain. He's not representing just Holland, right? And even to such an extent where if you and I were to represent, I wouldn't be representing England, I'd be representing Great Britain, which obviously would be a huge honour. But if we were part of and I don't want to go down the Brexit route, but if we're still part of the EU, we are still part of Europe, but we're not part of the EU. I would feel like I was representing Europe. So does that have the same impact as actually being able to represent your own country? And I think being able to represent your own country in the Olympics, if you are particularly patriotic, which I don't think I am particularly patriotic anyway, but if I was really patriotic, that would be the pinnacle, as you say. So even if he was to get into the Ryder Cup, it wouldn't be the same as him representing his own country in an Olympic sport, I don't think. And the other thing is it's once every 4 years, not once every 2 years. So,
well, that's right, exactly. And so I suppose I, maybe like you two, being golf fans, a bit biased on this one, but it just feels as if, like, so to give another example that kind of almost plays into this, if you remember, I was telling you when I last saw you, and again, like I've mentioned in this podcast, I listen to the Golfers Journal podcast a lot, and its format and its style is a big influence on this podcast. And they interviewed Edoardo Molinari, who is one of the vice captains of the European Ryder Cup team, probably one of the most successful Italian golfers that there ever has been. And he got asked a question on that podcast about, like, hosting the Ryder Cup last year in Italy. Has that done anything, or will that do anything? Will that leave a legacy to grow the game in Italy? And he said, honestly, no, it won't, because football is everything in Italy. And, like, it's just kind of, and it's a shame in a way that kind of, at least globally, and I see it especially in the UK and the US, there does seem like a fairly big effort to try and grow interest in golf. But I'm not sure we're all going about it as an industry in the right way. And
there's a lot of silos in the industry, isn't there, about what the best way to do those things, and you've always got the battle between the traditionalists and the modernists. That's the other challenge. But I think I saw something. I was flicking through, doom scrolling on Instagram earlier, and I saw, I think there's a golf coach who's a YouTube guy called Dan Hendrickson, and he shared an email that he'd got, which was around a professional tournament. It wasn't like an elite. Well, I suppose it was still a professional tournament, but I don't think it was a DP World Tour, PGA Tour event. I don't know exactly the context for it, but it basically said that under no circumstances was anyone to wear shorts, and if they were to wear shorts during any of the competition days, they'd be fined. And you're just like, you've got that on the one side. And I joked about it when you sent me the clip of Rory at St. Athan playing the old course today, and I said, I'm not sure about shorts at the old course. And then I just realised, well, why am I being such a dick about it, right? If it's that kind of thing that will help encourage a different generation take up the sport, then we should really be all for it. I don't really see why it should be. You don't want people turning up looking scruffy, right?
Well, I tell you what, this what you just said is a perfect segue into one of the stories I was especially looking forward to telling here. And I messaged you the other day. I'd just played 9 holes at my local 9-hole golf course here in Brecon, and what I witnessed, Ben and listeners, and what I overheard, it entertained me and it really kind of frustrated me in equal measure. So obviously for context, I mean, I don't know what it's been like in Norwich, Ben, but it's been scorchio, as at least to say in the Fast Show, over here in Wales in the last few days or week or so.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember, what's this now? We're recording this on Tuesday, the 30th of July. I want to say it was on the weekend, or I think it was Friday last week, right? Yeah. So I went up to the club sort of late in the afternoon or something. It was busy. And what I saw getting ready to go onto the first tee was lots of young guys, probably, bear in mind that school's out for the summer. There's quite a few schools within the town, and the golf course is right in the town. It's very accessible by foot and everything. So what you saw was clearly a lot of casual golfers. All guys, not. In fact, do you know what? I don't think I've seen a single female player at that golf club yet in sight, but that's a different story altogether. Yeah. So they're casual golfers. They're not dyed in the wool. They're just turning up. They're fair weather golfers, right? And so the second hole at Brecon is a downhill, slightly dogleg, right to left, par 4. And the fairway of the second hole directly intersects with the fairway of the 9th hole. So basically,
so they cross.
It's almost like it's like a plus sign, almost, right? So they cross. So and so there's almost this kind of like right of way, give way type etiquette scenario that plays out when you're standing in the middle of I can't remember who's got the right of way anyway, but let's bear in mind, Ben, that, and as I've said when we launched this podcast, I reflect on how golf has got so many rules. They're very overburdening a lot of the time, and I think that I think that because there are so many rules, it can it's a bit much, and I think it can maybe in its own way put a few people off. Just the thought of you've got to know the etiquette, you've got to know all these rules.
Yeah, it makes it intimidating for people to get involved, because what they don't want to do is make a fool of themselves by going along and doing something. And I agree. I think there are too many rules, and I also think that some of the rules are too punishing for people that are new to the game. So, for example, I think I was watching something that Rick Shields was on the other day where they were talking about, is it fair that if you hit your first ball out of bounds, your next drive is your third shot, or should it just be your second shot? You're already at a disadvantage by taking another tee shot anyway, or the alternative is you go up and drop where the ball went out, and that's your third shot, you're playing from there. There's ways and means in which they could make the sport, A, easier to understand, but B, less punishing, because I imagine a lot of the problem that you have at most golf clubs will be retaining new members. So people will come and they'll do a lot of clubs around here do like a summer membership, like a 3-month summer membership, introduction membership. And then if you like it, you carry on after that. But if in that 3-month time, they feel that they're not getting, not just understanding the fundamentals of the rules of the sport, that's enough to put people off, right?
Totally right. So I think that again, this does lead into what I'm saying. So basically, what happened was I've caught up. I'm playing on my own. There's a 4-ball of guys in front of me who have just teed off on the second hole. They see me and say, "Do you want to play down?" So the 4 of these guys, they're all wearing their Brecon rugby top jersey, because the rugby club is literally just down the road.
Sure.
So they've maybe had training or something, and they've come up for a casual 9 holes of golf. Now, 2 of the 4 guys are sharing a set of golf clubs.
Okay.
They do not fully clearly understand the whole etiquette of they've let me play through, which by the way I think is really great that a few casual golfers have recognised that's a good thing to do from a pace of play perspective. But there's 5 of us now descending down the fairway together.
Yeah.
You see where I'm about to go with this, right? So meantime, by the way, we're meandering down the second fairway, and these 2 older gentlemen, shall we say, one in particular who turned out to be an absolute curmudgeon, basically knocked...
That's a technical term.
That's a technical term. So they knocked their shots into... one went in the bunker, and his one came just short of the green, right? So he's clocked that there's two of the boys sharing a set of golf clubs. Cardinal sin number one, because you're not meant to do that according to the rules of golf.
Yeah.
He then also roasts us as a group for playing in a 5-ball. And we're like, we're not playing in a 5-ball. He's let me play through. We're all playing down to the green, and then I'll pull ahead of them kind of thing, right? And then he as if that wasn't enough, he then carries on, and then he eyeballs another 2 or 3 young lads who are just about starting the first tee, and he rollicks them for not having paid their green fee or whatever. Now, to context, that golf club operates an honesty box policy, right, for non-members. Okay. It's a very small club with very few resources, and again, I'm name checking the golf club here, and I've got to be careful with that, only because I want it to be clear that actually I think they've got a wonderful facility there.
Sure.
And I think given the fairly limited resources that they do have, they do a really good job of actually managing the club. But I guess for me, like, I could not help but feel like the attitude, the approach that was taken by that guy was just all off, and it was all wrong. And I thought, like, he's arguably got some valid points there in terms of the different things he's picking up on. But I guess 2 things occur to me, and I just want to welcome your views on it. Is one is like that strict application of taking the rule, for example, of no 2 people sharing one set of golf clubs. If you are brand new to the game, and you don't earn much money, for example, and you can't afford a set of golf clubs, or you're only a casual golfer, and you may or may not have a potential longer-term interest to take up the game. For me, I don't fully get, and this is where, for example, I'd love listeners to write in here and shit, like, because maybe there's something I'm missing here, and I have done a bit of digging around online, but that whole rule about sharing golf clubs, I don't quite understand why that's such a big issue.
I think it should only be an issue if it's a competition you're playing in. I think if you're not playing in a competition, if it's a casual round, you've paid your green fee, why does it matter if you're using the same clubs as somebody else? It makes absolutely no difference at all. So from that perspective, I think it's a bit of a... I do think it's different if you're in a perspective of playing a competition, right? Because let's say, for example, you're playing in a 4-ball, better ball, or a Texas Scramble, right? If you're allowing people to share clubs at that point, people have got the option of having more than 14 clubs in their bag, right? So from a competition perspective, I think it's a no. But yeah, if it's a casual round of golf, it gives a shit, Jesus.
No, well, this is kind of where I'm coming at it from. And I guess, you and I have spoken about it before on this podcast. If I think back to episode 6, I think it was, with Alex Frolish, Elevation Golfing Nation, he gave a wonderful sort of speech, if you like, around kind of inclusivity in golf. And I think like this, and it actually ties into a story him and I told back then about a similar thing. And it's like, through this podcast, I've got to know a lot of people in the golf industry already, and many of whom are like general managers at golf clubs, some of which are like kind of member owned, if you will, or member run, others which are privately owned by a wealthy entrepreneur or someone like that that's just bought it up. So I think there is a developing trend within golf, let's just say, as it relates to golf clubs, which I think is pointing towards, like, we already know that up and down the UK, for instance, golf clubs are closing down in numbers because they are very...
through the door. Yeah.
They can't get enough people through the door. And why can they not get enough people through the door?
That kind of... but I am going to play devil's advocate here, right? So, because there's a couple other things to think about. I think there's also, just whilst I think about it, sharing a bag is fine if you're not taking too long to play your round of golf. As you know, pace of play is a killer for this sport. So if you're not taking too long to do it, and I think over 9 holes, it's unlikely to have that much of an impact. Over 18 holes, it might have a bigger one. So, I can see why that could be problematic, right? But I think for a casual round of golf, I don't see an issue with it. The devil's advocate part of me is thinking, you don't know what's happened to that bloke in that day for him to be that narky. right? That's the other thing you need to think about. If you're looking at it from an isolated perspective, it seems like he's being off, but you or I or any of those boys there would have absolutely no idea what was going on in his life at that point.
Well, so Ben, I love that you bring that up, and that's a very fair point, by the way. But I have been, you know me, I'm a deep thinker.
You've been,
right?
I've been contemplating this for a while, have you? For 5 days. Detective stakes for 5 days.
I've only just lifted my head above the parapet now in time for this episode. Yeah, exactly. So the minute we're done, I'm going to go burrow back down there. So, but I have been thinking about this whole idea of like this podcast is called Golf Yourself Healthy, and what does it mean to that you know, when you hear those words, that basically sounds like you play golf and you'll get well, kind of thing, you know. But actually, I do wonder sometimes about, you know, golf can only do so much for you if you're actually bringing baggage or you're bringing certain things and it requires someone to work on themselves in a general sense. And I think this we're not going to solve it here in this podcast, but I would. And what I don't want this to be is kind of like I'm just having a rant or whatever. I genuinely would love our listeners to offer their own experiences of where they've seen that and how they've seen it dealt with, or the positive ways in which, you know, we can support the growth of the game and being inclusive. Because like, what's interesting is, you know, a few minutes ago, you I can't remember if we were on air by the time you said this, but there was something about that kind of like golf snobbery thing, the example that you gave, or where you were being a bit sort of snooty about something. Do you remember what was that you said?
That was about his shorts, wasn't it? Rory shorts
about the
at the old course.
About the shorts, right? So
that was only at the old course, right? So if it had been anywhere else, I wouldn't have had an issue with it.
No.
But
sure, but you make me think of an example at Richmond Park, for goodness sake, right? So, like, golf snobbery, I think, is really insidious because it can happen to the best of us, right? Because that's where I used to play my golf when I first got into it, and I remember I'd been playing for like, you know, a year and a half, and hey, you know, I'd got my handicap down from 28 down to 26, mate. So, you know, I was moving in the right direction. I was going places, and, you know, people should pay attention to me. But I remember like playing into a par 5, and the group in front of us had like left they were clearly newbie golfers. They left the flagstick out and they walked off the green. And I just, like, something possessed me. I was like, aye! Like, screaming at the guys, demanding that they came back to put the flagstick
back.
I'm like,
please tell me you then topped your approach about 30 yards in front of you whilst they were all watching as they put the flag back in.
I actually don't remember. I probably did. But
yes.
Yeah, well, but that's the point here, right? It's like, who am I kidding? Why do I need the flagstick in? So, boys, excuse me, I'm going right at the flag here, and I'm probably going to get it to within 6 feet. So, could you please put the flagstick back? You know, and that's what I mean. It's just like we've all got to take a good look at ourselves sometimes with this. So, I think something else I just wanted to touch on, and again, as we've said, we've got to be careful with the whole live and PGA thing because I want to be true to my word on this. But I don't know about you, but I've noticed so Live Golf just hosted one of their latest tournament in the UK this past weekend, and
that JCB club looks something else as well, doesn't it?
I've heard very good things about it.
My mate lives near there. In fact, my friend went to the Live on the last day, and he's played there a couple of times, and he often waxes lyrical about it. So
yeah. So.
You have to be invited to play it, don't you?
Yeah, it's no memberships or anything, I don't think, right? It's like it was JCB country, whatever it's called, it was bought, and it's quite new as well.
Yeah,
it's really new.
Opened sort of 6-7 years ago, I think.
Yeah, and it's like basically owned by the owner or the founder of JCB, you know, so what a life, eh? To have your own golf course, but and a very good one too. Yeah. But so I just really noticed in the run up to that one that there was my social media feed was full of adverts for it, and it felt to me like there was a really, really big push on trying to drive engagement and attendance at this one. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah,
or is that just me?
I think they did have good attendance as well, didn't they? They had a lot of people there. I mean, look, I think. Do I think it's the future of golf? No. Do I think that it's the... I think the future of golf is somewhere between what we have on the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour and what they have in Live, in that it's too extreme one way for me, personally. I think I don't like the idea of everything being like the Phoenix Waste Management par 3, whenever there's a hole-in-one, like every time. I think that has its place. I think, that Phoenix is the right place for that. Do I want to see that in every golf tournament that's played in the UK? No, I actually think it's not really something that I can get on board with. But I do think that there is some merit in the way in which they do things there, where it's a more relaxed environment. I think it's quite cool where they have the music and stuff playing, and so there's elements of it that I can get on board with. But I think there's somewhere in the middle. There's a happy place somewhere in the middle, but I just don't know if we'll ever get to that.
I think I agree with that, and I think that's a really good outlook on it. I think, full disclosure and just being really, honest, or keeping myself honest, is I think what I'm about to say, I think, will be coming. I've got my own biases here. So, for example, like if I, as you know, and as the regular listeners or readers of my journal will know now, I'm sober from drinking, have been for 5 or so years now. And, that was the kind of focus of the last kind of solo episode I did in the journal article I wrote. And I read, I'm going to see if I can put the link to this particular article in the show notes, Ben, but I was reading an article today by, I don't know if it was a golf or sports journalist or if it was just a member of the public or someone, but he was basically writing about how him and his young son, who I want to say was like 10 or 11 or something, had attended both the Open at Royal Troon and this live golf event at JCB this past weekend. And he was kind of drawing the parallels and the comparisons. And I think, one thing that I found interesting was how he mentioned that in the grandstands at Royal Troon for the Open, you couldn't take booze in there with you. So you had to sit and be very measured and respectful. And I think that, for me, I'm a bit of a golfing traditionalist at heart, actually, believe it or not. Like, given that I've talked about how I find certain snottiness or whatever about golf frustrating, I'm a bit of a, I like all the history and the heritage and everything that goes with it. So, but also the fact that, the minute that you involve alcohol and copious amounts of it, so he was saying in this article that actually there are elements that are very similar that he witnessed at the live event to what you described at the Waste Management Open in Phoenix or Scottsdale, wherever it is in Arizona, which is like lobbing empty beer cups onto the fairway and stuff like that, and trying to build up this rowdy party atmosphere. And I guess that's my worst nightmare. I can't think of anything worse than that kind of really kind of testosterone fueled sort of, and I don't find that but I don't find that overly and that's not inclusive in terms of, but again, that's what I'm saying. I'm coming at this from a lens of, I'm a sober guy. I don't value that type of... So
obviously I can't relate to where you're coming from this, because
sure.
I'm not that I drink a hell of a lot, but I'm not a sober person. But I mean, the one thing I would say is at the Masters, you can have beer in the crowds, right? You can have beer in the grandstands. We sat and drank copious amounts of beer when we were there watching it. But the atmosphere was still the right atmosphere, right? There was no rowdiness. There was just a lot of appreciation for the good golf you were seeing. And, it was brilliant from that perspective. But this is why I'm saying I think there's a happy medium somewhere, because what I don't want is to, whilst I don't mind the music coming when they have the walk-on music and all that kind of stuff, I can kind of get on with that a little bit. But yeah, that whole chucking the beers everywhere, every time someone, I just yes, that's just a bit too frat boy for me, and I don't. That's not what I don't. I have no problem with people having a drink, and I also find it quite amusing when players get heckled. I don't know if you saw the thing. I don't know how old it was, but there was one where Paul Casey turned around and told someone to shut up, which I found was quite amusing the other day. And I don't like that, but I don't mind the odd bit of needle that you get from someone in the crowd, because I think it can be quite entertaining. It's then a case of how well the professional golfers can take it in their stride and deal with it. But you don't want constant abuse, and that's what it'll end up being at some point. And, they'll end up being some sort of accident where someone's had too much to drink and they fall out of a stand or something like that, and that's when it's going to reflect badly on them. So I think there's, as I say, there's elements of it that I can get on with, the casualness of it, the fun part of it, the exciting part of it. That's definitely something I can get on board with. But trying to rile the crowd up to get them, as you say, like too rowdy when it's not really, it then becomes not a particularly family friendly environment to be in if you're in that kind of thing, which I think is a problem.
Yeah, I think that's nailed it. I mean, that's kind of how I see it too. And it would just be interesting to have a watching brief on it and see how the whole thing evolves. And yeah, I'd like to think that there could be a happy medium. There could, all of these types and formats can all coexist together. The AIG Women's Open is coming up at St Andrews in a couple of weeks' time. I went to the 2023 iteration of that in person at Walton Heath last year, and I feel like it was a really nice example of that kind of happy medium, which is they have like a festival set up in the there's almost like a festival arena kind of festival park bit where, you know, much like, to be fair, it seems like they had it live, and they probably had it at the Open as well, which is like, that's the thing that I think actually they do very well, because it's not just about the golf with live. There's a lot of stuff that's happening around it. Like, I think they have like a concert at the end of it. Like, someone actually performs at the end of it, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm not sure, and I haven't been to too many PGA events, as you can imagine, but I'm not sure there is that. It's on a Sunday, which doesn't help, right? It's the last thing on a Sunday where people are leaving to go home after a late finish. But there's probably an opportunity on the Saturday night, for example, when the golf finishes, for there to be something in and around the golf club that is more of a festival type feeling. As I say, I think there's somewhere in the middle of ultra traditionalist live golf, and I think it needs to be kind of there in that middle section. Yeah, and in time, I would love to see if they're going to be transparent enough to actually, or even if they can share kind of like stats around, like, you know, as a result of delivering these events in the ways in which they're doing them and all these fun festival style elements, how has that helped to generate new golfers? Or
do they care about that, though? That'd be the problem I have. Do they care about that? I don't know if they do.
Well, they say they do.
Well, yeah. Say and do two different things, aren't they?
No, I do get that, and again, we'll probably round this out here, but the point you've just made does go back to something I wrote about in one of my previous articles as well, which is this growing the game thing. Like that, for that very reason that you just gave, is where I get a bit cynical around using the term growing the game in the context of the professional game.
Yeah, as opposed to what it actually means to take up the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, no, it'll be interesting. And it was. I
just want to point out as well, when I say do they care, what I mean, I don't mean the golfers. I mean the people that live around it. It is their sole aim to make it a more accessible sport for people, because if it is, having people throw pints of beer all over the place doesn't really feel particularly accessible for me, right? So, you know...
nor me. That's exactly the point. That is spot on. That's hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. And I just... Again, they're kind of missing a trick there somehow, I think. So if they do truly care about being accessible and inclusive, then they could potentially...
There's other ways.
There's other ways of doing it, you know. So looking ahead to season 2 of the podcast... Well, I'm not going to stand here now and necessarily commit to the exact date, because although I have one in my mind, and it will definitely be at some point in the month of August, I'm just still working through the schedule and which order and which episodes will be released. But yeah, I mean, look, I think just to start off in this, I mean, for instance, I'm travelling up on Thursday to Aberdeen to stay with my mum for a few days, and then I'm going to then drive down with her to St Andrews on Friday, where I'm going to be interviewing the director of people, or in simple language, the HR director for the St Andrews Links Trust.
Okay. Taking your CV out with you?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I've got a few copies printed off just through the house. Yeah, so I just dusted it off, ready
I'll
to.
send you mine. You can take mine up as well if you like.
Yeah. But no, so I mean, I'll say thank you to my friend Fraser McJanet, who listens to this podcast as well, because again, Ben, this is a great example of where people are being really kind and supportive to try and help grow this thing. Is his wife used to work with Scott. Scott is the HR director up there, and lovely guy. I've had a few chats with him now on Microsoft Teams, and yeah, we're gonna get a round of golfing together at the Eden course on Friday. Not the old course, but
Eden's so nice though. I played Eden. It's it's quite a nice little track. You'll enjoy it. It's not too punishing, so you'll enjoy it, I think.
Winner. He said to me the other day, Ben, he said, "Oh, are you bringing your clubs up with you? Because if you're not, I could let you try out the new Callaway smokes."
I'll leave mine at home then.
I said to him, I was like, "No, I am actually bringing my clubs." But I said, if I did try, I'm being serious here. One, if I tried them out and loved them,
you'd be spending a load of money.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need them. And then secondly, because I'm a tall lad, I'm 6'3", all my clubs are extended.
Yeah.
So sure. So unless I can't exactly turn up when the guy's hosting me and he's agreed to give up his time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
topping ball after ball as is.
You don't. What do you mean you don't have extended clubs? Like, come on.
These just are not good enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I am taking my own clubs, but no. So I'm going to go up, interview him for the pod, and yeah, no, I just think for me, St Andrews is a really magical place. There's something in the air up there, and just it's the home of golf, right? So I think I'm just looking forward to making the journey up there, and I think that'll be
I'm just trying to think. Was it the Eden I played, or did I play one of the others there? There's like 6 courses there, isn't there?
There are.
I can't remember if it was that or I might play the Strathrytham course, which is like the easiest one. We played that on the old course when we were there.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've already learned a bit just through the course of getting to know him and speaking to him.
And looking at the course online for 4 or 5 hours at a time as well. I imagine it's usually your way, isn't it? You've already ordered the, the green book off eBay.
The course guide, yeah. No, I have not. I haven't. Okay. How dare you? Okay. How very dare you? I'm a changed man, Ben. So there's that, and then I think, like I said before that in season 1 of the podcast, it started out, and this idea of grief came up a lot, like golfing yourself through grief, and then that was one theme, and then we sort of did through the course of interviewing just other people, get different stories and themes coming out around golf and well-being. And I think if I just, without giving too much away, I think a couple of sound bites that I've kind of picked up on already, which I've just found interesting from the guests that I've recorded with for season 2 so far, is just this notion of self-improvement, basically, that I think is one of the features of golf, if you like, which I really love, is and how I believe it is good for you, that much like in life, you can always work on yourself, right, to be a better person and to be a better golfer. And it's just been quite interesting to sit and listen to different people's perspectives on, how, just like comparing golf with life, and how, and actually a few of my guests have been people that are quite new to golf. I've got more female guests lined up for the second season, which I think will be good to get a female perspective more as well.
Yeah, great.
And people who just are, again, not dyed-in-the-wool golfers, have been in and around the game for donkey's years, so fresh perspective.
Yeah, see if you can get what their views are on the live golf compared to the main professional game. It'd be interesting to see where they think the line should be. The other thing I was thinking about as well, and I was talking to Brian about this the other day, is golf is so good when it comes to resilience. And given that my son is 8 years old and has never wanted for anything in his entire life and probably won't ever want for anything, because I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to spoil him for the rest of his life. But the generation of children that have come after us, or, our age of children, and when, Kim and you are in that same position as well, they get everything quite easy, which means it's very easy for them to give up on something if they're not very good at it. And certainly my son is he can be a bit guilty of that at times. He's starting to show a little bit more sort of, he's done cricket in the past and he didn't quite get it, and he didn't really want to stick with it, and he's done a few things where he sort of started to do it and then not really stuck at it. But just having the golf lessons he's had is showing him that it doesn't matter if something doesn't quite go your way every time. It's a difficult sport and you've got to keep plugging away at it. And sometimes you get good lies, sometimes you get bad ones, right? So that resilience thing is a massive part of that. And I think that's why kids should get into this sport more, because it helps to teach them about resilience. Because it's about you, right? It's about you playing against the course. Any other sport the kids play, they're playing in the team. So, and the whole point is you win and you lose as a team. So even if you make individual errors, you're not really having to deal with the resilience of it because you're supported by the rest of your team. But actually, in isolation, golf is so good for that. So,
just to kind of give a heads up and advertise what I'm considering is a bit of a mini series that we're going to run with Golf Yourself Healthy podcast in this next season, is like a spotlight on golf societies. Because Ben, I've spoken with you one-to-one here in this podcast and outside this podcast about how much I love, and I think you love and value too, the Ryder Cup thing that we do every year. And it got me to thinking about how, there's an understated benefit to golf, because to all intents and purposes, what the Ryder Cup thing that we do is a golf society, right? And there's like an understated benefit, I think, to, for example, men's mental health around, getting together. It's like the once in the year where a lot of guys who know each other, used to work together or went to school together or whatever it might be, who are now, in their kind of early, mid, late 30s, early 40s, all have young families. And, it's just the camaraderie, the companionship, the fun, the variation and the different standards and types of golfers and the inclusive, nature of that as well. So I think you and I will hopefully do an episode together just spotlighting the Ryder Cup. I've also lined up a couple of other groups of guys who, have golf societies and who I just want to, again, like hear from them, like what is golf to them? How is golf good for them? What has golf given them? And what are golf societies doing, for example, as a means to kind of introduce people into the game in a more informal and friendly way, or, just a different expression of the game. So looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And then I think maybe one last thing I wanted to do, we do like to give an honourable mention on this podcast to those out there who we've come across in our golfing journeys that are inspiring us. And Ben, I got to know a guy called Greg Watson recently who started following Golf Yourself Healthy on Instagram. And I had a chat with him. I think he came, if I remember rightly, he came to know of the pod through having listened to the episode with Alex of Elevation Golfing Nation, because he, like Alex, is a golf course reviewer. He does reviews for top100golfcourses.com. And what is really inspiring and really beautiful and lovely about Greg's story is that he, for, I can't remember how long, I want to say a couple of years now, since the passing of his father and then following the death of his father, he found out that his dad had been suffering from depression. And he has been traveling all around the UK, playing all manner of different golf courses and raising money for Mind, the mental health charity. And at the last view, he's raised £8,000 or like more on a cumulative basis. And I think having a chat with him, I just think it was great to just hear how people, again, are using golf for good and, spreading the word, about mental health, for example, as well. So that's an honourable mention. That's a shout out to you, Greg. I know you've been starting to listen recently. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. But then also, Greg has got an Eagle has landed story, Ben. Oh, okay. And he doesn't even know I'm going to tell it.
Excellent. You're not even giving him a chance to send it in. You're going to tell him.
No, exactly. Because listeners, I've yet to hear from you about your Eagle has landed story, so I'm just going to have to tell them for you. So, Greg, I spied on Instagram the other day. He's a member at Hillside Golf Club up in the Liverpool sort of area. His son, by the way, is a +5 handicapper, and is called Tom Watson. and is much younger and probably better looking than the actual Tom Watson, who we all know
he was
about.
a good-looking lad when he was a younger Tom Watson.
So he was, to be fair. He had a good barnet on him as well.
Yeah.
But they were playing, I think it was, at Hillside recently. He got a hole in one on the sixth hole on the par 3. Yeah, and I messaged him the other.
They film it.
Hang on a minute. No, I don't know if he did. But I messaged him the other day and I said, "Oh, mate, you got to talk me through this hole in one." He's like, "Oh yeah, it's my sixth ever hole in one."
Off. Don't give him kudos for that, then. That's his sixth.
I was just like,
I'm not interested in that.
No, exactly. I was like, I mean, chance would be a fine thing to get one, But no, that's great though. So
amazing stuff.
Yeah, really, really good.
Hillside, apparently. I've only ever heard good things about Hillside.
Yeah, no, likewise. I mean, it's you will see over my left shoulder there, that map up there is
the courses on it.
That's a scratch off.
Oh, okay, cool.
And Hillside is on there. So that's not.
Greg,
Honourable mention, Greg Watson.
Just for the listener, Kris winked at the camera there. I think he's forgotten this is an audio format, not a video format. Unless he's going to save it for the Instagram post, I suppose.
I don't know. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, no agenda intended whatsoever. I do want to just give a shout out to people doing really good, inspiring things in the game of golf. And Greg is most definitely doing that. And if you know of anyone else out there doing similarly inspiring things in golf, we'd love to hear from you. So before I send the listeners on their way back out onto the fairways, Ben, is there anything else you would like to add? No,
just to say I'm very much looking forward to the next series of interviews and things like that you're doing with people, podcasts you're doing with people. And again, I am still always hesitant to listen back to the episodes that I'm in. So I'm looking forward to the other ones more than I'm looking forward to the ones that I'm in.
I think, I probably have to. I've got the opposite problem. I listen back to these episodes all the time, and actually the numbers are getting fudged because I'm downloading. It's all me.
The 48 of the 49 reviews are from yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that is not what I'm saying. I have no. I have not given myself a single review. However, what I did
too much, Kris.
What I did notice, though, looking at the data and the analytics the other day, was I'd obviously I'd listened back to one of the old episodes in the car because I was trying to get inspiration for a future episode or something, and then I went online. I was like, "Hang on a minute! Like that number's just gone up." Yeah. Oh yes. Oh, no,
it's me.
Oh, it's me. Yeah. Oh,
I've downloaded it to all 15 of the devices I have in my house.
I did learn, however, I listened to a podcast about podcasting, and that is a thing, by the way. That is a little sneaky. Yeah, and I do not do that, and I will never
stick to the authentic, because otherwise you never know actually how good you are at what you're doing, right?
It's like you're just fooling yourself at the end of the day.
So download things and things like that's pointless.
Or having loads of phones and trying to download it multiple times or whatever.
That's an expensive way of doing it, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Well, no, it's getting all your mates to get to do it or whatever kind of thing. So, You still haven't done it despite the number of times I've asked you. I'm just joking. Well, we'll edit this back. So anyway, Ben, thanks as ever for being so selfless with your time, and I would like to remind you and the listeners to always embrace the rough and forever cherish the fairway. See you on the other side in season 2.